Hello and welcome to Boomer Banter, where we have real talk about aging well. I am your host, Wendy Green, and every week we talk about the challenges, the changes, and the possibilities that come with this season of life. And today we are exploring what it really means to live fully all the way into your hundreds. When I first read the book, Walking with Beth, I expected a story about longevity, about reaching 100 and beyond. But as I turned the pages, I realized it was so much more. It's a story of friendship, imagination, and resilience. It begins with curiosity and joy. Then it gently leads us into vulnerability and acceptance. I found myself smiling and reflecting, and yes, even sometimes worrying about both Merilyn Simonds, the author, and Beth, the famous Beth who she's walking with, as they faced the realities of aging. Thankfully, both are well today, and we have the privilege of learning from their extraordinary story. Merilyn Simonds is the internationally published author of 22 books, including the novel The Holding, a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice, and the Canadian classic nonfiction novel The Convict Lover, which was a finalist for the Governor General's Award. Among her best-selling nonfiction is A New Leaf, the story of her gardens north of Kingston, and Gutenberg's Fingerprint, a meditation on reading, writing, and the future of the printed book. Her last book, before the release of Walking with Beth, was Woman Watching, which won the Forward Indies Editor's Choice Nonfiction Award for 2022. It's an innovative memoir biography of Louise de Caroline Lawrence, I hope I said that right, an extraordinary recluse who changed the way we see birds. Merilyn Simonds' latest book is a memoir. It's called Walking with Beth, Conversations with My 100-Year-Old Friend. And it was recently released by Random House Canada in September. And it's the book our conversation is going to be focused on today. So let me welcome Merilyn to Boomer Banter. So nice to see you.
Hello, lovely to see you too.
So I want to start at the beginning, and I want to start with, what inspired you to get started on these weekly walks with Beth, and were you both in good health at the time?
We were, yes, and are. So I was turning 70, and not being a birthday person, I'd never really cared about, 21, 30, 50, whatever those landmarks were. The 70 seemed different to me. My mother died at 75, so I thought, well, what is this next phase that I'm going into? And what does it look like? What does the terrain look like? And the year I turned 70, Beth turned 100. We'd been friends for, I don't know, maybe 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't see each other often. We would email periodically and bump into each other. We weren't sort of regular friends, we were in the same loop. So I called up Beth and I said, do you want to have a visit? And she said, well, it's COVID, we should go for a walk. So we put on masks and we went for a walk and talked about everything under the sun. And at the end of the walk, she said, wow, I think we should do this again next week. And I said, I think so too. So Wednesday at 3 became our time. And it's just, we haven't stopped.
And you haven't stopped. And that was 5 years ago?
Yeah, that would be 5 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, 5 years in a row. Yeah.
Amazing. So before we get into the beauty of this book, I am curious about the through line of the books you've written. So I said 22 books at the beginning, but this Walking with Beth is your 23rd book, right?
I should go back and count again. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. You're very focused on the one in front of you. I'm certainly in the 20s.
Okay. All right. But I'm curious about what captures your interest enough to write a book. Like, kind of what's the through line?
Yeah, it's interesting because my books aren't premeditated, and I'm not a writer who labels herself as a fiction writer, nonfiction writer, memoirs, etc. I don't stick to a genre. I write about whatever comes in front of me and snags, my interest. But if I look back at it, I think almost all my books, in one way or another, are interested in very ordinary people who have something extraordinary to say or who are doing something extraordinary. The first one in that literary line was The Convict Lover, and that was the story of a 17-year-old girl in the little village outside the walls of a prison who starts a correspondence, throwing notes over the wall, with this convict. And nobody would ever know that she existed except for this book and except for me finding her letters and his letters in the attic when I moved into Kingston.
Wow.
But also in A New Leaf, which was my garden book, a neighbor down the road was a master gardener, not the technological master gardener, but he was a fabulous gardener, especially with roses. And he taught me how to sharpen my tools, how to take care of my tools. He had an approach that was really, really interesting to me. And again, nobody would know about him. And Gutenberg's fingerprint was Hugh Barclay, who is weird, wonderful human being who was in his 80s when I met him. And he had restored a 19th century press and was printing books by hand. And so that book is about me printing a book by hand with him.
Oh, wow.
And at the same time developing it as an ebook with my son, who's a digital book designer. So
Wow.
it was, it was kind of the perfect trope for thinking about the strange place we're in right now. That paradigm shift. And Louise was another one. And, off in the woods, nobody would have ever known she existed. And it's the same with Beth. I mean, Beth isn't, she's not going to make headlines, but she is a person that I really would love people to know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's makes a lot of sense, that through line. So Merilyn, one of the lines that struck me early in this book was your conversation with Beth when you two were talking about the artist Hokusai, and that he had a vision for the next 30 years. And Beth responded, "So do I." And she was 101. So what does that even mean to have a vision for the next 30 years if you're 101?
Well, I think what it means is that you live very much in the moment. And she doesn't feel, and she doesn't seem to me to be any different than a 20-year-old or a 50-year-old. You could easily say, at 50, I have a vision for 30 years. We find it odd in a 100-year-old, but I think it's just a way of saying she is still forward looking. So many people, when they hit 65 or 70, they start being backward looking, right? They're looking at their accomplishments. They're looking at things they did at a younger time and finding joy and satisfaction in that, but they're not looking ahead. And I think the people who have the most satisfaction as they, enter their later years are people who are always, looking ahead to a phone call, to a meal, to working on a piece of music or a piece of art or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is the focus, right?
So it's looking ahead to something to look forward to. It's not necessarily 30 years ahead, but it's just having something to look forward to.
Exaggeration.
Right. But I loved how she said that, because she obviously looks forward to things in her day.
Yes.
And that's how she meant that. I think you're right. So as you said, So many people after they retire or they hit a certain age, they start to think, well, and now what? What am I going to do? And you wrote, when a person has left the working world and all its must-dos, the garden plot is still calling. It says,
Yeah.
come, weed me, please water, look at me now. And I love that metaphor. And so how do you encourage other people to discover a purpose when their to-do lists fall away?
Well, I guess my to-do list has never disappeared. I mean, writers, and I think artists in general, don't have as much difficulty with this, right? I mean, we see writers. Edna O'Brien wrote Little Red Chairs when she was 88. Margaret Atwood is 86. She's on tour right now with her new book. Roger Angel, baseball hero, columnist in the New Yorker. I mean, he wrote his last column when he was 101, right? I mean, when you're in the arts, you are naturally constantly stimulated by new ideas and new projects. You finish one project, and I know some writers say, okay, that's it, I'm not writing anything else. But most of us, we just like the next idea comes forward and say, okay, me next. And yeah.
Yeah. And I think that people that aren't artists can still use that metaphor, like you can grow a garden, you can cook a meal, you can creatively play with children. There are things that you can do to stimulate that looking forward and that being stimulated.
One of the things that Beth does, which I think is really smart, and that I don't do, but I will try to incorporate it into my life, is that she, I'm Wednesdays at 3. She has somebody that's Monday at 12:30, and somebody that's Thursday at 2, and somebody that's Friday at 4, and
Wow.
Saturday at 1:30. And so every day she is expecting visitors or phone calls at certain times. And it kind of pegs her week, right? So she's always looking forward to someone visiting or calling, and especially in the winter, which can be quite a lonely, isolating time for older people. But she has all these phone calls lined up, and it's not just the pleasure of chatting with somebody. It's parachuting into someone else's world, right? Mm-hmm. Which is an act of the imagination. It keeps the imagination alive and keeps you living in the present and keeps you alive to the world, which I think is really, really important.
I think it also takes your mind off of your own stuff, your aches, your pains, I'm tired, whatever. Now you're talking to somebody else. And like you said, parachuting into their world. That's a great phrase. Yeah. Use that in your next book.
Okay. Thank you.
I know. That's why you're a writer. Yeah. Beth also said, if people would just listen to their soul, they'll find the solution to anything.
Yeah.
And that's not like in a religious way. So what does that mean to you, to listen to your soul?
No, I mean, Beth is not woo-woo at all, right? Or religious or any of that. So Beth believes, and I think she's right, that all of our experiences accumulate inside us, often inside our bodies. My sister is a physiotherapist, and she says when she works on a person and on a muscle here or there, sometimes people will just start crying or they'll start laughing. I mean, we store things in our body, but we also store them in our intellect and in our emotions and in our heart. We know this. But she has taught me, and I was never very good at this, that when someone asks you to do something or when you have an idea to do something, pause. And yourself, I guess is the best way to say it, yourself will answer whatever the question or the dilemma or the invitation is. And it will answer it in a way that is true to you and your history and your needs of the moment.
Mm-hmm. So rather than just always saying yes or always saying no.
Yeah, and I always say yes, right? Somebody says, oh, sure, I'll do that. Right. And And I'm trying to pause and say, well, is that right for me right now?
Mm-hmm.
Beth is a great, well, Beth started as an occupational therapist during the Second World War, and she ended working at 99, working as an art therapist with veterans returning from the war in Afghanistan who are suffering from PTSD. So she's done a lot of therapy in her life, and she's not heavy-handed about it, but I think that's part of her, her toolbox is to listen to herself. Yeah.
And so, as you went on these walks and you started to pick up this bit of wisdom from Beth, when did you two together decide, oh, we should make this into a book?
I'm not sure exactly. I mean, in the writing of the book, I make it sound like it was right away, but it wasn't really. We Beth is a writer too. Did I say that? Beth
No,
is
you
a
didn't say that, but
writer.
uh-huh.
She wrote her first book in her 90s, and one of the times we became quite close was that I helped edit that book with her. And then she published another book at 100 called My Journey to 100. And right now at 105, she's getting ready to publish her third book. It's all finished, working with the designer. Okay, so Beth is a writer by nature. She makes notes on everything. So she was making notes. I was making notes. And at one point, I don't know who said it. We kind of stopped in the middle of a walk and said, this should be a book. And whoever said that, the other person said, yes, it should, because her real, her motivation in saying that was that people need to understand passion and developing passion as a way of living later years to their fullest. And my motivation was that, oh my goodness, I want people to know Beth. I want people, I don't want to be the only one hearing all this great stuff. I want other people to have a portrait of her. So I don't see it as a memoir so much as kind of a portrait of Beth and portrait of a friendship, because she's worth knowing, and she's not going to, right?
Yeah. In fact, one of the things that I remember that she said in the book was kind of about what she thought her obituary might say, speaking about passion. And she said, in order to live and love as many years as I have, you must have passion, many passions, she says.
Well, yeah, it doesn't have to be one, I mean, my sister, who is a physiotherapist, developed photography, and she's fantastic. Another sister became a jazz pianist. I mean, and actually, after reading this book, my third sister wrote to me recently and said, well, I've been inspired by Beth, and I started drawing again. And she was quite a wonderful artist when she was younger. Mm-hmm. And so, sometimes we dig deep into our interests of the past. Sometimes it's something completely new. It doesn't matter, as Beth says, the what doesn't matter. It's that it is a passion. It's something that moves you deeply.
Because she came up with some very interesting creative pursuits. Do you want to tell us about some of the stuff she was doing?
Yeah. So that first COVID winter was very hard for many reasons. And so she has this big old-fashioned dining room table. In fact, it was her father's dining room table. And so she started collecting all kinds of bits and pieces, colored paper, twigs, stones, beads, just any little bits and bobs she had around. And she had a friend cut these sort of, about this size pieces from very thin plywood. And she would sit down at her table without intention. She would sit down and she'd sort of look at all these things and gradually bring them over, and she'd create a collage on that little piece of plywood. And she'd take it over beside the chair where she likes to sit to read in the living room. And she would look at it over the next few days and enjoy it. She'd take a picture of it, and then she'd go take it back to the table, dismantle it, and Another one. So these are completely ephemeral things. They're just for her.
Uh-huh.
And they're fantastic. And then at some point, I don't know when, some point in our time together, she decided to start making stamp paintings. So I gave her my old stamp collection. A lot of people, my vintage, collected stamps as kids. Wayne, my husband, collected stamps. We had all his mother's shoe boxes full of stamps.
Oh
She was in
gosh.
the military, so there were stamps like from all over the world. And so Beth did not remove the stamps from their backing, trimmed the backing so it was really small, had these large panels, like the biggest one I think is about 4 by 6 feet. And so
Feet, 4 by 6 feet.
huge, it's huge.
Oh
And she
wow.
started gluing, like she heaped up the stamps by color. And then she started using those heaps of colored stamps like paint and creating these most beautiful stamp paintings. I mean, who knew, right?
Right?
Yeah,
I
no, it's
love that.
yeah, yeah. And so the first one that took, I think, 2 COVID winters, and as she says, they saved her through COVID winters. But she donated this big triptych to the post office in the village where she spent all her summers from the time she was born until she was in her late 70s. And of course, they were thrilled to have it.
Oh, of course.
And now they have a lot of visitors who come just to see Beth's triptych.
Vintage. So vintage is another word that she used. Instead of saying I'm old, she would say she's vintage, which I love that.
He's very careful. And I've done, I'm on tour right now. So I've done quite a few events. And one of the things that keeps coming up is how older people trash talk themselves, like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
old, I shouldn't do this. Or what can you expect? You're 75. Or happy
Right?
birthday, old fart. Right? I mean, we don't need to do this. We are at the same stage, I think, in thinking about older people that society was at in the 70s, thinking about women and about people of color. We have to expunge our vocabulary of all of these, denouncing negative terms. And I just think it's so important. And Beth has been my teacher in this. She refers to herself as a woman of a certain age, a woman of my vintage. Uh,
Vintage.
she doesn't, she doesn't go around complaining, I'm so old.
Right.
Right? I mean, when she
Right.
turned 100, she said, what is this number? What's changing? And then she turned, 103, and this year 105. And now people flock to her because of that number. And what I think, we don't want to be treated as women, because we have breasts, we want to be treated as people. We don't want to be treated
Mhm.
by the color of our skin, but we also don't want to be treated by the texture of our skin or the number of years on our birth certificate, right? We want to be treated as people.
That's so true. That is
Yeah.
so true. And I think it's women and men. I think that this
Oh, yeah.
ageism has become a real problem, and we do it to ourselves.
That's the issue.
We exactly, we do it to ourselves. And you say, don't resign, adapt. And,
Yeah.
we're not old unless we give into being old, right? Old is a
And
state
we're
of mind
older
in a lot of
every day of
ways.
our life from the time we slip out of the womb, right? We are aging. So even talking about aging is a weird term.
Mhm.
And we adapt our whole life. We have so many things, especially women, to cope with, right? Getting our period, losing our period, going through the drought of menopause, and all of those things. And okay, it's not great. Okay, you have aches and pains, but why focus on that, right? We
Right,
don't.
right.
Yeah.
So, but I do want to talk about some of the challenges that you have had, like you had this very painful condition while you were working on this book. Beth has lost two of her children and her husband.
Yeah.
And yet you both remained resilient. You kept living. So, like, what is that secret sauce that has kept you both moving forward and being optimistic about what's to come?
I don't have like a recipe to impart to people. Say do this, that, and the other thing, and you can get through this stuff. But I've always been a glass half full kind of person. So is Beth. I have a pretty great ability to ignore my body, which gets me into trouble lots of times as well. But when you're really sick, it's kind of a good skill to have. I did things like I refused to have anything negative around me. So I did not watch the news. I did not watch mysteries or crime thrillers. I was sure that all the images going into my head were positive and contributed to my well-being. And I think that's really important. One of the things I've learned from Beth is, she says, if she starts to go down into one of those dark places, she just says, Beth, don't go there. And
Really?
she goes and does something else. Yes. And even in our conversation, she, organ recitals are not for her. She does not want to be, moaning and groaning about the state of our health. We didn't do that at all. I mean, and if we did it in even the tiniest way, she would say, okay, let's talk about something else.
But Merilyn, you got to a point where, you were losing your vision. You were in so much pain that this 103-year-old woman was driving to pick you up to go for a walk. So, how did you?
Right?
Right.
It was just such a role reversal. But I put that in the book, not to tell people what a bad shape I was in, but to illustrate friendship and how friendship has no age limitations to it, right? I was in need and my friend stepped up and she took me out for picnics because I couldn't get out. Otherwise I couldn't see, I couldn't walk. I had medication induced dementia. It was just, really awful. I'm fine now, everybody. I'm fine.
I know. That's why I said in the opening, I was worried about you as I was reading the book.
Well, and I should say what it was, because a lot of people who have this illness, and I was on a chat group online for a while, a lot of people get very discouraged. So I had giant cell arteritis and it was hell, no doubt about it. But, got good medication and I came out the other side. You never get rid of it, but you go into a kind of remission. And it meant a lot to me to have Beth and her positive attitude around me. And I think if you aren't naturally positive by your regular nature, then I think surround yourself by positive people, positive television, positive movies, positive books, and I don't mean necessarily self-help, because sometimes I think self-help books can make you feel inadequate, right?
I think so too.
Stories that tap into the goodness of human nature.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that surrounding ourselves with positive people and the messages we take in. I know anytime I do get distracted and see a news flash, I'm like, oh, I don't want to hear that because it spins you up, and it's kind of one of those things that I think we talked about in the beginning, or maybe we talked about it before we came on the air, that if you can't do anything about it, then why let it take up space? Why
Exactly.
worry about it?
Yeah, you can be informed without being obsessed, right?
Yeah.
And Beth, there is a part of the book. The book is written in all these very, very short sections. I think there's 75 short sections.
Mhm.
And the longest of them is called What We Carry, and it's a section where I go through, Beth was born in 1920, and in 1929 women became persons in Canada, and when she was 10, and when she was 13, and when she was 20, and then I was born the year she was married, and then it's the two of us going forward through all these things that we've lived through. And it was so, we both were adamant to keep that in the book. Because, Beth lived through the rise of Hitler. Beth lived through the Red Scare, the communist witch hunt in the 50s in the States. She lived through hard times. I grew up in the middle of all the assassinations in the late 60s, right?
Yep.
I mean, and the Vietnam War and that devastation that lasted for 22 years. And, every generation, I think I hear my kids and grandkids say, "Oh yeah, but you didn't have it as bad as we're having it." Every generation thinks that what they're growing up in is the worst, but the truth is every generation has their own stuff to deal with, and it helps to know history. Yeah.
Boy, that's for sure. That's for sure. And what you just recounted is part of what I started this whole podcast around, is that we grew up with those things and they've kind of shaped us into who we are. And I think we feel like we can still matter and still make a difference. In fact, there's a quote that you use from Carl Jung, and he says, "The afternoon of human life must also have a significance of its own and cannot be merely a pitiful appendage to life's morning."
Isn't that the best quote? And he wrote that in what, 1930, 33, something like that.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's true. We have to stop thinking of these as the waning years. Yeah, we may not have all the energy we had 10, 15, 20 years ago. But, keep moving, keep thinking, keep loving, keep laughing, right? Keep alive. Stay alive to the world. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And Beth is just such a poster girl for that.
But she's aware that she's become famous for being,
Oh,
103, 105, right? And you said to her, but you're not famous because of that. You're an icon of possibility. You've lived and you are living.
yes. And
And
that's,
that
that's, I know other people who make it to 100, but it's hard to say that they're living, they're kind of existing. And I don't want that. I don't think most of us want that, do we? We want to be living.
Well, I mean, as long as you're here, it's better to be living than to just be taking up space.
Until we're dead, we're living. So
That's right. Right.
so we might just as well make the most of it, right?
Amazing. Yeah. So towards the end of the book, Beth reflects on what she imagines her obituary might say. And I did say some of that, but she also, besides the passions, she also says, exercise every day, be nutritionally aware, and laughter. I do love to laugh. So does she still make her own food, and is she still exercising every day?
Yes. So when I first met her, she was standing against a wall, shoulders, bum, heels against the wall. And she would stand like that for 15 minutes to keep her posture. And I have to say, she has the best posture of anybody I've ever met. And she walks with firmness, like with a firm step, like anyone else. No shuffling for this lady. And now she doesn't do that. Now she stretches. So she has a whole series of stretches that she does every day. And she walks at least a couple of kilometers every day, which is like a mile.
Even in the winter?
Yes. Yep. As long as the weather isn't too cold, because, nothing works exactly the way it did in the past. And so she has to be careful if it's too cold, she can't breathe properly. So, but if she can't walk outside, she makes laps inside her house. And she cooks
just to be clear, I don't think we mentioned that you're in Canada. So
yes,
Beth and Merilyn are in
Vancouver. Where it does
get very cold. It does get very cold.
So she has been a vegetarian since she was in her 40s. So for 65 years, she's been a vegetarian. She bends it a little bit. She does sometimes have bone broth now, because she needs the protein. She's, as you age, you lose muscle quite naturally. And so you need more protein. Older people tend to eat less protein, but they should be eating more protein. And so she does that, but she doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, never has. She has a woman come in every Thursday to cook meals under her direction and freeze them. And, so that, and then, but she makes all of, she cooks everything herself and stuff. Yeah. No, she, and I have to hold back from saying still. I want to say still every time I talk, she's, still cooking, still living on her own, still, but
She wouldn't like it if you said that.
no, I don't think so.
Yeah, and that goes into that whole image that we have of,
Exactly.
old is, and so if you're still doing it, then you're still,
Well, and it kind of implies a best before date, right?
Yeah.
And there isn't a best before date. If you feel creaky in the mornings, maybe you need to exercise more instead of sit and complain that you feel creaky in the mornings, right? or move to Mexico where it's hot and dry.
Move to Mexico, which is what you do in the winter.
Yeah, it's I have hard to manage asthma, and a lot of arthritis. And boy, you get off the plane in Mexico and the arthritis disappears, and so does the asthma. So
The arthritis too.
Yeah, it's it's amazing. You kind of forget, you kind of drop 20 years. It's great. Yeah.
So do you see yourself living into the hundreds?
Oh, I have no idea. I really don't have
Those 30 years. Come on, that vision.
Well, I mean, I am constantly thinking ahead, but I don't think in terms of birthdays. I don't have the genetic background to have that expectation. I think if I was around for another 10 years, that would make me happy. But I'm sure once I get to 85, if I'm still writing, I'll think, well, why not 95? Oh, why not 105? Right? I mean, when you were 50, did you think about how long you were going to live? I mean, you don't, right? You just, you make plans a certain amount of time ahead and hope for the best. Hope you don't get hit by a bus.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Oh, that would be quick. Hopefully.
Yeah, it's good. I'm voting for, a heart attack in my sleep. That's right. What I would.
Quick, no pain. That's done.
My grandmother died that way. She went to sleep and didn't wake up, and that's lovely.
Yeah. But
next, do we have enough time that I can mention one more thing about Beth?
Yes. And was there anything you wanted to read from your book?
Oh, we talked about this, didn't we? And now I've completely.
Yeah, we don't have to.
I do like to read from it. Yeah, I'll read this little bit. Yes, I know what I'm going to read. Okay, sorry. Okay. I was just momentarily.
I know we were having too much fun talking.
Having too much fun. It's true. Where is it? Sorry, I just have to find it. I want to read a section that kind of shows Beth's relationship to art, because that's so important to her. Okay, so this is the book.
Walking with Beth. Yes.
Walking with Beth. This section is called The Empress of Radical Happiness. Beth is coming to visit. I can count on one hand the friends who have stepped over our threshold in this first year of pandemic isolation. But Beth is vaccinated, and so am I. Neither of us is symptomatic, but we test anyway. Negative. Our excuse for defying the public health stay-at-home order hangs on the wall. In the depths of our first winter in Canada in more than a decade, my husband and I bought an enormous painting of San Miguel's Distant Desert Hills by Catherine Bruce, a Canadian artist who works in Mexico half the year. I spotted the painting the first time we visited Catherine's house. The image was inspired by the view from her rooftop terrace and by the cactus garden outside her studio. For me, the painting is Mexico. The color, Beth exclaims the minute she enters the room. The energy of those lines. She reaches to touch the filaments of electric blue, white, gold, and hot pink that flash across the canvas like carnival streamers. And look at this, I say gently, laying my hands on her shoulders and swiveling her to face the opposite wall. She gasps. Meet the Empress of Radical Happiness, I say. The oversized huipil, created by our San Miguel friend Lena Bartula, is part of a series she based on the iconic Mesoamerican blouse. Huipils are still worn by village women throughout Mexico and Central America. The cloth is typically hand-woven and embroidered at the neck and down the front. The one on my wall is a collage of found fabric, scraps of cloth and lace stitched here and there with bright pink and turquoise threads, and at the neck, a golden fringe that might once have held back a theater curtain. Our great extravagance, I say to Beth. Oh no, Beth protests, not extravagance. I believe this is essential. Her belief in art is absolutely profound, and I think I mentioned she was an art therapist in the second half of her life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what's part of what's keeping her going now, I think, is all of her art and her creativity. So listeners can find you on your website, Merilyn, and that's Merilyn, Merilyn Simonds, SIMONDS.com. But as we found out, Merilyn, the book we can't buy from Amazon in the US, right? You have to go to amazon.ca.
That's right. In order to buy. Yes, at the moment, there's just a Canadian publisher, not an American publisher.
And when I looked just a few days ago, it was sold out. So
it is. It's an instant bestseller. It hit all 3 bestseller lists, a national bestseller list in the first week. And it's been, it's been out for 1 month and it's sold out, and they're doing a second printing, so it should be available quite soon.
Well, and it's also an Audible, you said, right?
Yes, and I did the narration for the Audible book, which it was great fun, and I think works quite well. And I should say that there's a lot on my website too. There's a page for this book, and you can hear a conversation between Beth and I that we recorded last summer. Several excerpts from the book, reviews, lots of interviews and a little documentary about the book, a 20-minute documentary that was made by CBC Radio. So all of those things are on the website. So there's lots to look at while you're waiting to receive your book.
I know, and everybody is going to love this book. I absolutely fell in love with it. I have friends in Canada that saw that documentary, and they were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're talking to her." But I think what makes Walking with Beth so special is it's not just a story about aging. It's a story about friendship and connection and creativity and possibility. And that you and Beth remind us that aging well isn't about avoiding decline. It's about choosing to stay engaged with life in all of its beauty.
That's really, really true. It is intentional. It's a choice. Yeah.
Yeah. And if Beth were sitting with us today, what do you think she'd want our listeners to remember about living, not just long, but well?
She would say, find your passion and cultivate it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's what nurtures her. That's what keeps her going. When, her daughter died during during our time together. And she's had lots of setbacks. A very close friend of mine died last week, and you have these setbacks, but as long as you have a passion, a way to enter yourself deeply, you can get through anything.
Yeah, and a friend. You have to have a good friend too.
And a friend can remind you to do those things.
That's right.
Yeah.
Merilyn, thank you so much for this really rich conversation and for sharing Beth's story with us. I really hope that everybody can get a copy of this book as soon as it's available again. But remember, Amazon.ca or Audible.ca.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for this podcast that you host, which I think is part of the change in attitudes towards those latter years that we need as a culture and as a society to undertake.
Thank you. That is definitely my intention, is to help change our mindsets about it. Mm-hmm. And listeners, be a good friend and share this episode. Tell people about the Boomer Banter podcast, because the good information that we share here is not as helpful as it could be if we don't let others know about it.
Yeah. Share it with your friends.
Share it with your friends. A little blurb now from me. You were made to thrive no matter your age, just as we heard. And if something's been quietly holding you back from that full, vibrant life you dream about, I have got something special for you. It is the What's Keeping You Stuck quiz. And if you take it, it's a very short but eye-opening quiz that's designed to help you discover what might be slowing your momentum. Because as we discussed, sometimes you lose that passion. You forget what it is that keeps you excited and motivated. But so once you take it, you'll get 5 personalized emails with encouraging tips and powerful resources to help you step into the life you know that you are meant for. Because the best is not behind you, it's possibly ahead. So find the link in the show notes. I've got it up on the screen right now. And try the quiz. See where you might be stuck. It's kind of fun. And Merilyn, I wish Beth was here so I could thank her too. Thank her for us.
I will. And I'll send the link so she can watch it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And thank you all for tuning in, all of you that listened live with us and all of you that are listening on the podcast. Thank you so much. And I will see you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.